Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast, that's the word, brought to you all by the fabulous Queen Anne Beer Hall. RJ, so today's our big Shark Tank trade deadline special. We got a bunch of calls in, everybody giving us their takes on what they want the Seattle Kraken to be doing at the trade deadline, who they should be looking at, maybe trying to bring in, all that stuff. And before I even get to potentially a new deep dive curse we have discovered here, RJ, I have to mention that while we were sitting down to record this, the line got a call. We started to receive a call on the line while we were going, so we wait for the call to go to voicemail, we wait for the voicemail, and it was a school trying to reach a parent about a child not being at school today. And so hopefully that situation gets settled, but it was very like climactic, RJ. I was all ready for it, and then just anticlimactic once we got the message. I was like, oh man, this could be the best call we get or something. Not that the other calls were bad, but I was just like, wow, somebody's really trying to squeak it in here. This is really this could be cool. And then it was just like, oh no, okay.
Yeah, I was like, you have no idea how much you just beat the buzzer on this. Yes. We were ready to hit record. I'm like, all right, we'll give it a shot because this could be a good call. No, a student is not there to do their physical fitness testing today, so hopefully that gets resolved.
Yeah, it sounds like you could reschedule for the 24th though, so I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, 16th, 22nd, or 24th.
There you
so
go.
Lots of options.
Lots of good options. There we go. All right, RJ. Let's kick things off with the Seattle Kraken. Before we get to all the trade deadline stuff, let's kick things off with what the Seattle Kraken are up to today, on Monday, February 6th. RJ. It sounds like the Kraken are practicing. We do know that. But there's some news about who is there. Why don't you fill everybody in?
Yes. So some very good news about practice attendance today. All the names that maybe we were wondering about, are they healthy? Are they not? What's going on after the All-Star break? Everybody is there at practice and in attendance. Yes, little claps going on there. That includes Justin Schultz, Matty Beniers, Jaden Schwartz, Chris Drieger, who actually seems to be taking full practice with the team. So that's another step forward. I'm not surprised to see that after he was kind of ramping things up when the Kraken were last at home before the All-Star break. So it's not a huge surprise to me, but it's definitely something to think about and something that we're going to talk about today. And then Jaycob Megna, the Kraken's most recent trade addition, was also there in attendance, I believe wearing number 44.
All right, so we're definitely going to be talking about that as we get into the trade talk in just a little bit. But obviously that is just fantastic news to have everybody back out there on the ice. I mean, that is a sight that Kraken fans have been waiting for now for a little while, and it's really good to see as everything gets back up and going. Who would have known it, RJ? A bye week, a week of rest for everybody to get healthy. Maybe that's a good idea.
I know the good that it can do in a season like this. It's such a grind. And I know there was a lot of disappointment, from me and you also, that the Kraken didn't have a player going to the All-Star game. Yep. But you look at it coming out the other end, it really does look like a blessing here that you can just get everybody healthy on the same page.
Exactly. And, why don't we segue into it? We talked all about All-Star Weekend over on our Patreon podcast, Red Glare podcast. You and I maybe not the biggest fans of this year's rendition of the All-Star Game and All-Star Weekend. Like I said, we definitely do its own kind of deep dive over there on that podcast. If anybody wants to know, and obviously we've already heard back from some patrons who agree with us. Some disagree. It's all good. But yeah, Kraken not having somebody there. It was obviously odd. It felt a little out of place. However, for certain things like the skills competition, I mean, there was no Duck there. You saw Kaprizov kind of sitting there but not doing anything. There was, it didn't feel as off for the skills competition just because the skills competition was a little off itself this year, we'll say.
Yep, agreed.
But who was there for the Seattle Kraken, RJ?
Buoy.
Bowie was there, and you know what? I thought Bowie did an okay job representing the Kraken all by himself this year.
Yeah, I think so. Getting into the normal shenanigans. I think recognizing the few Kraken fans there and making sure they had a special time and hanging out with Gritty a lot. I
Yeah,
definitely noticed that.
yeah, that seemed like an effort made on both parties' behalfs, was to get them together and try to form some sort of tandem there. We'll see what comes of that in the future, if anything comes of that in the future. But Bowie's a troll, Gritty's the ultimate kind of online troll, so there's something there. There's something there.
Yeah. And, you know, 2 games against the Flyers next week, so maybe
All
we'll
right,
see it
well
sooner rather than later.
that's what we'll see. Do you think we'll ever see like mascots traveling?
Ooh.
How dope would it kind of be if like at Climate Pledge like Gritty just comes out?
That'd be amazing. I
And
would have to just get out of the press bridge and go walk down there and find
right,
him.
and like Bowie and Gritty get into it, like they do like a home and home like fight, like they do like a boxing match during intermissions. I think that would be fantastic. Personally, I would be all for it. So we'll see what goes on there. And Bowie also maybe making some moves for the Kraken that we'll hear about later when we get to these trade calls that everybody
Yes.
left us. So he was definitely doing work for them off the ice. We'll see if maybe that can translate to something on the ice. But let's go ahead and let's just dive right into all the trade stuff, RJ. Before we get to all of the wonderful trade calls that people called and gave us, let's talk about the trade that they made. You talked about it earlier, adding Jaycob Megna. I guess, why don't you go ahead and explain who he is and everything, and then we can kind of break down what this might mean for the Kraken coming up on the trade deadline.
All right, so I'll go ahead and do that. So we'll start with, okay, well, who is the newest Kraken? Jaycob Megna. So he is a left-handed defenseman, kind of third pairing type of guy. First thing that stands out is his size, 6'6". Very big guy. Fits a theme along the Kraken blue line.
Yep.
The Kraken like the large boys, so they brought another one here. He's got this size, but notably he doesn't take too many penalties. He's physical, but doesn't often cross the line. And the big story with Megna this year is who he's been paired with pretty much all season. And that is Erik Karlsson, who is having a resurgent year. I think he's probably still at 100-point pace. Has got to be the Norris Trophy favorite at this point. And Jaycob Megna has been pretty much attached to the hip with Erik Karlsson all season. Megna and Karlsson are the 9th most used D pair in the entire NHL, just in terms of minutes played together. And so that's kind of the big question we can get into a little bit later. How much of that is Karlsson holding Megna up? But hey, it takes two to be a D pair, right? And so Megna has his role on that pair, but he's more of the stay-at-home guy. Erik Karlsson, as we know, is the one who's going to take the puck up, make a lot of that offense happen. But Jaycob Megna is still a productive part of that D pair. So that's who he is. He was with the San Jose Sharks the last couple seasons. He was with the Anaheim Ducks for a while before that. Let's see. He has a brother. I believe his brother's name's Jason, who's also in the NHL. Some of you may remember, if you're really active on hockey social media, there was a picture that was circulating around of the two of them. There's a pretty big height difference there. Jaycob being the larger of the two. So that was kind of a funny picture when the Sharks played. I believe it was the Ducks. Anything else to add, Dylan, about Jaycob Megna?
Not really. I think we could just kind of start going into kind of breaking down where he's going to fit in with the Kraken and everything. I guess the one thing I will say is, look, this is a defenseman who was drafted by the Anaheim Ducks during a time frame in which the Anaheim Ducks have done nothing but draft and develop defensemen that end up being at least serviceable NHL players, which Megna has turned himself into, with upside for more. Now he's 30, so maybe like he's kind of what he is. That's probably the case with most 30-year-old hockey players, but that's not to say that he's going to be a bad fit here for the Kraken. You talked about him being paired with Erik Karlsson. You look at like kind of his the underlying numbers for Jaycob Megna, and they all look fantastic. But again, it's helped out a lot. Anything like Corsi based, shot based, anything like that is going to be helped out a lot by playing with Erik Karlsson as much as he has been. Kind of impossible not to. So it's a little hard to get a read on him in that sense. But I like the size, I like the physicality, I like the fact that, like you said, only 21 penalty minutes so far this season. That's not bad. I just think that, this is a really solid addition for the Kraken. And I think the most notable aspect of this that we should talk about, RJ, is the fact that he does play on the left side. Now, we talked all off season about acquiring right shot defensemen, guys for the right side, bringing those guys in. They tend to be more valuable out there on the open market. But I think you and I both, Kraken fans as a whole, kind of identified maybe the weaker link in the chain on the blue line for the Kraken this year might be Carson Soucy, plays on the left side. Do you think that this trade is kind of maybe foreshadowing something done later with Carson Soucy?
Potentially. And whether that is, at the trade deadline this year or this offseason. And another thing that's worth mentioning about Jaycob Megna is that his contract runs for this season and next season. So he's not on an expiring deal. This is a player acquired for now and the future. He has got to be in the Kraken's plans for next season as well. And it comes at a very affordable cap hit, just a little bit over the league minimum salary. I believe it's $762,000. So a very affordable number there. And I think you have to be looking past the time where you're going to have Carson Soucy on the blue line, whether it's sooner rather than later. And so, I was kind of going to get to it, at some point. Are the Kraken done? What else could they do? And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that as we, kind of segue into the, into the trade proposals and the trade calls that we have from you. But I think that's certainly something that I thought of right away when they acquired a left-handed defenseman.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, is this insurance kind of for this year as you continue to make a push, and then you look at, okay, maybe we'll have to lose a Carson Soucy in the off season. He's obviously going to be a UFA, depending on where money goes. Maybe that money from Carson Soucy goes towards the Vince Dunn contract, things like that. You have to start considering. Is the insurance for that? Is the insurance just in case there's a injury on the blue line, period, as the Kraken, very much seem headed towards the playoffs, and that's always something you have to kind of prepare for as your team heads there. Forward depth, obviously not a problem for this team. We've got way too many forwards. So having someone else to kind of have around on that blue line in case somebody goes down alongside Cale Fleury could certainly be something for the Kraken there. Or I think we do have to kind of talk about the idea, and we will later, a little bit later as well, about the idea of, maybe the Kraken move a Carson Soucy. We know they had substantial interest for him last season and didn't end up moving him. Obviously, the infamous Oilers jersey at the Oilers team sale that the Oilers had put together for him. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if the Kraken go ahead and make that move. They have time. The trade deadline, we are early on all this. Trade deadline isn't until March 3rd, so there is time. I think it'll be really interesting to see if Megna kind of rotates into the lineup at all before then, or if he's kind of, just a potential injury replacement for when they need one. I mean, do you think they'll start rotating him into the lineup?
I think eventually, because you want to start getting him some reps. But if everybody else is healthy, I don't see how he makes the top six given who they have right now. And that is kind of borne out in the line rushes from practice today, where you have the 3D pairs and then you have kind of the fourth D pair, quote unquote, of Megna on the left side and Cale Fleury on the right side. So it would appear that those two would be your scratches. So I think eventually you want to kind of get everybody into some game action and get them reps. Although, in Cale Fleury's case, it didn't seem like the Kraken were too concerned about that for most of this season.
Right.
But I do think that's kind of what Megna is that just in case, knowing that injuries are a reality, and it's not if but when you're going to get an injury on the blue line, and then he can go in there and you've got a left shot D that can step up. Gustav Olofsson is, I think, injured pretty long term, so he's not really an option for you on the left side. And so I got those questions about okay, does this mean something for Soucy at the deadline? Does this mean that Justin Schultz is out longer term? Before we saw him at practice today, and I said, maybe, but not necessarily. I think this is the kind of move that makes sense, even if everybody is healthy, and even if you are going to hold on to everybody, just because you needed that depth there, and especially come playoff time, this is the kind of deal that you need to make to gear up for a playoff run.
Right. So now I have one more kind of question about this, because bringing him in gives you, kind of 7 defensemen on the active roster because Justin Schultz is still technically on IR. Schultz comes back off IR before like kind of the roster opens up post trade deadline. Do you think somebody's going to need to be sent down off this active roster before then?
As it is, not really. I mean, we'll get to Chris Drieger in a second, but because the Kraken have been only using 22 roster spots so far. So there is room for Justin Schultz to come off IR, and you have your scratches as one forward, whichever forward is kind of rotating out of the lineup at that point, Geeky or Donato, and then 2 defensemen, you've got Fleury and Megna. So there is room for that. You don't need to make a roster move right away. The big wild card is, what if Chris Drieger comes back before the trade deadline, and then you might have to make a move.
Right, exactly. So just wanted to get that out there and clarify that. Now, what's interesting is because we have the trade calls from everybody else, and then afterwards, you and I are going to kind of talk about our ideas of who the Kraken we're going to bring in. And this kind of threw a wrench in that, because this kind of fits everything that you and I were looking at. Bringing in Jaycob Megna gives them, like we said, an option on the left side, a pretty stable option. This is a guy with term past this year, very reasonable contract, good cap hit. Like, I don't know. Do you think that in this trade, where they traded away a 4th round pick, it'll either be the Krakens or Colorado's, whichever the Kraken decide to send over, do you think that this trade could maybe be it for the Kraken, RJ?
I think there's a chance that it could be it, because you look at what could be next that they could bring in. I think, maybe you could bring in a forward with some edge. I know they've got crazy forward depth, but that's something I've heard floated around there, that maybe John Hayden isn't quite enough, or you want like a real agitator type that becomes available. Personally, I wouldn't do it, just given how inflated those prices are, but maybe it's something they think of. Maybe you could bring in another defenseman, but it's getting crowded at that point. You're probably going to have to waive someone there. There's a decent chance that they may be done.
Yeah, so, and that therein lies potentially the new deep dive curse that we have discovered, RJ, where we try to get out a whole month ahead of the trade deadline, do a trade deadline kind of special, get everybody's input, and the Kraken go make a deal, and it's a deal that is so solid and such good value for them that we now look at it and we go, oh, they might be done a month early.
Yeah, and of course it's the time where big news breaks, perfectly timed for the deep dive. It's the night right before we record.
That's like, the trade-off.
Perfect. Yep, that is the trade-off. So, it is what it is.
Yes.
Never ceases to amaze.
I was gonna say, you all know the story at this point. Those of you who have been following us for any length of time, the great deep dive curse of news breaking, within really 12 hours of us finishing recording for the Kraken. In this case, they finally got ahead of us, but it kind of disrupted what today's plan was for everybody involved. So just had to mention that because, just, I don't know. But good on Ron Francis. It's a fantastic deal no matter what. Good on the rest of the front office as well. Happy to have Jaycob Megna on board and a member of the Seattle Kraken. So with that out of the way, RJ, let's move on to the wonderful calls that we had in here from everybody. We have 6 calls to go over here, RJ. We're just going to go in order that we received them. All right. So let's go ahead and play our first call here from mystery caller number 1, we'll call them. Not everybody wanted to leave their name. Totally fine. So mystery call number 1, here we go.
Hey guys, I know this is kind of a weird year with a lot of teams wanting to add but not really knowing where to add, but I'm going to throw out some names mainly on the defensive side. So I think we should try to move Susie somewhere and maybe get like a replacement kind of on the same level, maybe even a lower cap hit. I think the Leafs maybe trying to add a defenseman could help. Maybe move Susie to the Leafs and maybe throw in like a second or 2 seconds and utilize those picks we have in this upcoming draft, and maybe try to get someone like Matthew Nyes back. Not necessarily something for this season, but maybe for the future. And then maybe look at a replacement for Susie and someone like Luke Shen, who has a lower cap hit. It may be like someone like Gavrikov or even like Brett Kulak, which might be kind of hard to entice the Oilers, but there's a lot of term there. And that's all I've got.
All right, RJ. So that's something we had obviously just kind of talked about, was the idea of moving Carson Soucy. So, and maybe trying to get somebody with a lower cap hit. Jaycob Megna, does that like answer the question of this call? Like, kind of?
I know this, depending on what happens here, if the Kraken do choose to move Soucy at the deadline, this call could prove pretty prophetic.
Yes.
As early as it came in, move Soucy somewhere, get a replacement with maybe even a lower cap hit. I mean, That's Jaycob Megna. I know he mentioned, getting a Luke Shen type, that kind of fits there too. They've got a similar price tag. So yeah, I mean, the second half of it has potentially already happened. And the first half, we can talk about, what do you think of the prospect of moving Soucy at the deadline? I think pretty much no matter what he's gone this offseason, you have this, this balance, right? Do you want to take a valuable player potentially off your roster while you're gearing up for a playoff push to get some assets in return? Or do you want to hang on to him and probably lose him for nothing in the offseason?
Right. And I think most of that comes down to whether or not you think, like, I think all of us collectively probably agree that the Kraken's true competitive window is not this year. It's in the future, as Maddie reaches more of his prime, as Shane Wright starts coming in. Some of these top prospects that they have start factoring into the equation a little bit more. However, Kraken are playing really, really, really well this year, RJ. They've proven more than capable of beating anybody on any given night. And I look at this Kraken team and I say, they have the scoring for it. They've got the depth up front. And this is depth that, potentially later on in your more true window, you're not going to have available to you. The blue line is solid enough to kind of get the job done. And then you've got 2 to potentially 3 goaltenders that you can lean on and try to rotate through and find somebody hot enough to steal a series or 2 if you need one. I'm kind of starting to come around to the idea that if you're the Kraken, given how well this team is playing, they've kind of shown that, this isn't just like, oh, we got really hot for like a month and a half and we're kind of living off of that kind of points window. Like, no, this team is just good. I'm kind of coming around to this idea of, like, you don't need to like sell out for this season, but maybe you kind of go for it a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And Carson Soucy could be, I mean, this is a term we hear a lot about, just basically keeping a pending UFA, like, oh, he's your rental. It's, he's kind of the guy that you brought in on an expiring deal. And I think there could be something to that as far as the Kraken just basically keeping Carson Soucy as their rental player. And it, it wouldn't surprise me, certainly, not at this point, to see that. I think if you're moving Soucy out, it's because you're bringing in another player, somebody that you like, that you feel can help you for this season, or knowing Ron Francis, maybe now and the future, maybe somebody who's under contract for a little bit longer. And that's the only scenario where I could see Soucy moving at this point, is if they ship him out, get some kind of assets back, probably futures, probably draft picks, and then go ahead and flip those for a player who can help them now.
Right. I mean, the Kraken are working with, a handful of second round picks. They've got 3 of them this year. I don't think that, they'd be interested in maybe moving their own first. Maybe that's something they would do over the off season in some sort of trade, with a more futuristic outlook than just this upcoming season. I will say this, as much as I just kind of made the argument and have definitely kind of personally come around to the Kraken going for it this year, so to speak, and really trying to focus on winning this year and seeing how far you can go in the playoffs, I do feel like more than anybody, Carson Soucy is the most expendable piece. I don't feel like he's not totally contributing a ton on special teams on the back end. He's just a third pairing guy. He's had his issues, whether it's discipline or coverage net front. Given the fact that, both your goaltenders have looked good. They're both proven capable of winning games, but they're both, are they still both sub 900 save percentage? Like they haven't been great as far as like statistical performance and stuff goes. I still feel like that's something that, the Kraken PK has been up and down all year. You can't afford to give other teams power plays, especially in the playoffs. So I do worry about that, him kind of maybe being a discipline liability a little bit come playoff time. So I do think that you could keep this whole team going. You can keep everything in this kind of solid push for the playoffs, but potentially remove him from the equation or replace him with somebody else, whether it's Jaycob Megna or you bring in somebody else. So I will kind of throw that caveat out there of like, I could see that happening. As for some of the suggestions that the mystery caller gave us, let's start with Luke Shen, RJ. I kind of like that idea. That would be bringing in somebody that's going to be a little bit more physical, kind of have maybe some of those nastier elements. Yeah, it's back on your blue line. It's not up front, but Luke Shen, he's looked okay this year in Vancouver.
Yeah, he has, and I think he's probably, I think, would cost a little bit more than what Megna did, just because I think there really is that appreciation from a lot of teams about what he brings, and to the point where I've heard rumblings, Vancouver, that the Canucks actually want to keep him because Tocchet's going to value a player like that. Like, guys, what are you doing?
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I wouldn't mind that kind of acquisition. I think. It'd be a little bit redundant with the Megna acquisition. I know Shen, is on the right side and it could help you there. I think if you're bringing another defenseman, it's probably a puck mover. But certainly when this call was made before the Megna deal, I think, that's a great fit.
Yeah, and I know I just talked about the discipline issue with Susie. Luke Shen has more penalty minutes, but Luke Shen also fights, so that kind of those add up a little quicker than taking minors for infractions in your own zone. So there's that one. The other name I kind of wanted to talk about from this is Gavrikov. Because he's someone talked about around the league right now. Hold on, I'm trying to find where's Columbus on my sheet here. There we go. There we go. So Gavrikov, he's been talked about somebody that the Blue Jackets could be moving on from because they're, obviously in full on let's go for Bedard mode. He's on an expiring deal, 27. What are you thinking there? Do you think the Kraken could be interested? Left-sided guy, again, only 27. He's somebody that you could kind of keep around if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any interest from the Kraken there. And the reason is this: I think he would fit well on the team. I think he'd be a good acquisition. I know I've heard plenty of people kind of link him to the Kraken. I know like Darren Brown from Sound of the Hockey, that's kind of his, flag plant type of guy that he wants. But at the end of the day, I think the price is just something that's not going to make sense for the Kraken. Because if you look at what the Blue Jackets are asking and what I think they can get, because we know that this is the case on trade deadline day, where defenseman prices are just super inflated. You look at, trades like, was it, the Ben Sherratt deal last year, and just where you can have guys that, Savard, I think actually, was it David Savard, the trade to Tampa?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. They all bleed together.
Well, because that's the comp that Columbus is looking at.
Okay.
They're seeing the Savard trade, which did include a first round pick, plus. And they said Gavrikov is younger. He's playing better than Savard.
Yep.
He's a more valuable asset. I have to agree with that.
Yes, 1,000%.
So we're going to start there, and the price is going to be higher. Yeah. And I think it will be. And it just doesn't make sense for the Kraken to give up a first round pick, probably plus a prospect. Right. The price that it's going to cost just doesn't make sense unless you feel like he is your big now and the future defense ad. And this is the one big ad you're making to your defense for the next 4 years. And I don't know that you can make that decision right now. So I don't think it makes sense. As good of a player as he is, as much as I think he would fit in.
Yeah, and as much as Columbus is definitely going to for sure move him at the deadline.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, he's played really, really well in Columbus. You look at like kind of the numbers he's been able to put up, and it's kind of remarkable given the lack of team around him this season. So it's somebody the Kraken should be interested in. Yeah, are they going to get him? Probably not. The other name that stood out to me from this call, RJ, was Brett Kulak.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just gonna say no.
Yeah, so sorry, caller. I'm sorry, I'm not on board. I don't think the Oilers would move him within division anyway.
Probably
but
not.
I just don't think Kulak's in the cards, and I think that's probably for the best.
Yeah, probably. I don't know about how much term and money's left on that deal either. For him, he'd have 3 years after this still at the 275 number.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the thing that's kind of scares me away in this situation. All right, so let's move on to our next caller here. It looks like it is Duthan's call.
Hey, Dylan, RJ, this is Duthan. Wanted to talk about goalies trading. We've got 3 goalies. I love them all dearly, but we're not going to be able to carry 3 goalies on the roster. And Martin Jones is now up there, kind of the winningest Kraken goalie in team history. So I don't think you want to keep him around. Maybe look to extend him next year. Philip Grubauer, I think is playing well, and also I don't think anyone's willing to take his contract. So that kind of leaves Chris Drieger is unfortunately the odd man out, as much as I like having him on the team. And so I just have been thinking about like what we could pick up in terms of assets, both to clear cap space for next year. And unfortunately, the team that I think would be most willing to pick up a goalie might be a team that we're playing in the first round, which is the Los Angeles Kings. And so there's a whole, what if we trade him to the Kings and then, they proceed to beat us in the first round of the playoffs? We look kind of like schmucks, but I still feel like it's probably worth taking a flyer on it, because hopefully we don't end up playing the Kings in the first round at all, and it would help us against every other team. So with that in mind, I was looking at assets that we could get from the Kings potentially. And Drieger's got, more than a year on his contract. So I was thinking it wouldn't necessarily have to be someone who would be a UFA immediately, so someone like a defenseman, Matt Roy, maybe, if they'd be willing to give him up. But anyway, or maybe we could even work out a 3-way trade. I think defense is probably our greatest need. So let me know what you think in terms of, what what is a reasonable path forward with the goalies at the trade deadline. Thanks so much for the show.
Okay, RJ, goalies. Goalies.
Your favorite topic, Dylan.
I know. It's only because they're so mysterious and I never know how to evaluate them or anything. Obviously, the Kraken are going to be in this situation. We talked about it earlier. Chris Drieger now may be back and practicing. We've talked about this. Would the trade deadline kind of roster situation alleviate itself so we wouldn't be put in a situation where we've got to deal with 3 goaltenders, RJ? We might, though. Depending on how things happen here. So, do you think the Kraken are going to be actively shopping one of their netminders this year, RJ, before the trade deadline?
Depends what your level of actively shopping is. Because
I was going to say, do you think they'll be put in a position where they're going to have to move somebody?
Yes.
Okay.
I think they will. I don't think they're going to carry. I mean, just with the Megna trade, I don't think they're going to carry, 3 goalies on the roster. You don't have that extra spot unless some big injury happens, and we hope that it doesn't.
Right.
But, that might help make the decision there and free up the space to keep Chris Drieger. But ultimately, I think you're not going to keep 3 goalies on the roster for any kind of long stretch of time. Now, I think Duthan correctly identifies that, Grubauer, with that contract, he's with the Kraken for better or worse.
Yep.
Martin Jones, you don't want to move, just given how well he's played this season.
Totally agree.
He has pretty much all the wins. So that leaves Chris Drieger.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, what do you do with him? Duthan kind of explores the idea of maybe trading Drieger, potentially to the LA Kings, potentially to a division rival there. I think, Dylan, this is the question I have for you, and I want to discuss this. What do you think Chris Drieger's value is on the trade market? Because I might have an unpopular opinion here.
I was going to say it can't be a ton, just because everybody's going to naturally be worried about the injury. Right. It's impossible not to. Without him having played yet, without him really having practiced a ton with the team and everything, that is going to be everybody's concern. That's definitely going to keep the price down. I also feel like, RJ, this is like the worst year in recent memory to potentially have to move a goaltender, because there's not that many teams out there that are trying to add a goaltender. Usually there's a couple teams where they're kind of more they're borderline playoff teams, but they're just down a goaltender, somebody got hurt, something happened, and they're looking at adding one. This year, I mean, LA is kind of that only team. Like, that is the only team out there. So I feel like that's also working against the Kraken in this scenario, is the fact that you're not going to be able to necessarily create good bidding wars for a guy, and especially a guy coming off of injury. I mean, 3rd round pick, second, maybe a second if a team's desperate.
Okay, so I agree with you. Uncharacteristically bad goalie market this year.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's going to be very tough. And taking that into consideration, so here's my potentially unpopular opinion. I think, before playing, but just basically in the state of coming back, before anyone's seen him play, I think Chris Drieger's value is negative as an asset. Unfortunately, just because of that uncertainty with the injury, and because he has another year on his contract at $3.5 million. And I don't know that any team is going to want to take a jump at that, knowing that he could potentially come back, not be quite right from the injury, and you're on the hook for pretty sizable amount of money. I mean, that's a little bit more than backup money, a little bit less than starter money. And adding that to your crease, you have to have a team that would feel comfortable taking a gamble on that. And most teams that would gamble on that, I think, are not the kind of teams that would be in playoff position and looking to add right now. You might hope for next year you'd gamble on it. Oh, he can come back and be a starter for us. But any team going for it right now, I don't think it fits. I think ultimately the Kraken are going to have to waive Chris Drieger, which might be for the best for everybody. Send him down to the Firebirds, get him some games, some reps there. And then if he comes back and plays well, then all of a sudden you have an asset.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay.
I definitely disagree with you there, because I think this is where having that extra year on his contract actually helps. Because if you're a team bringing him in, then you can potentially, that opens up the trade market to just not to the teams not just like on the playoff bubble this year, but teams who think they might be there next year. Because they can look at it and say, okay, he's coming off the significant injury. We could trade for him now, maybe get him at a cheaper price because of the injury and everything. Maybe we can steal him for a 4th round pick or something from the Kraken, just because they're kind of stuck roster wise and they really need to get rid of him. We can, they can kind of pull a reverse Bjorkstrand on us. Okay. And they can get Chris Drieger, because if you look at Chris Drieger, I mean, this was a guy that everybody was saying he could go and be a starter for a good team coming out of Florida. Right? Like that, like a lot of hockey people were pretty universally on board with that idea. You look at his numbers last year, they weren't great, but they weren't terrible considering how bad the Kraken were. And you look at his numbers from being in Florida just a couple years prior behind a good team, a playoff worthy team, and he was fantastic. And so if you're a team that's thinking about contending next year, but you don't necessarily know that you have your goaltender yet, I say go ahead, try to steal him, try to get him cheaply here. Give him the rest of this year. You can take it slow. You can then evaluate him yourself. Have your own doctors and everybody go through that process. Finish out the last bit, really, of his rehab within your own building. Deal with all that stuff, and then know you've got a goaltender next year that, if you think you have a playoff-worthy team, can play very, very, very well behind that club. So that's where I think having that extra year on the contract is an actual asset. And if I'm Ron Francis, that's the kind of the story that I'm pitching to potentially move him.
I mean, it's a good argument to make, and you have kind of played up the positives of it there, and I think it's risk reward. I'll say that much. There is potentially high reward, and you do take some risk along with it. I just don't know that there's going to be teams that it makes sense for them to take that kind of risk, because and also if you're looking at the Kings, it's going to be a tough one to fit. You're going to use up pretty much all your deadline cap space on that. And then also for next year, you've got Drieger and Cal Peterson making, basically amounting to starter money. Is that the goalie tandem you want to go with without a whole lot of flexibility to add to that? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I don't know that it would make sense for the Kings in that scenario, but I think of a team like Ottawa. And you've got Cam Talbot only under contract through the rest of this year. You're not going to go with him. Are you really that sold on Anton Forsberg? Maybe not. Like maybe you then want to bring in a Chris Drieger. It is only 3.5. So if you think you have a playoff worthy team in front of him, which Ottawa, when healthy, is kind of maybe that next year, I could see them going like, well, you know what, 3.5 to maybe get a 915 save percentage. Not bad.
Right. But then why do this deal now?
Because he would be cheaper now before he's good from the coming back from the injury. That's the whole thing. And because the Kraken are desperate for the roster spot. Those two things work to get him cheaper now than if he comes back, plays really well with the Firebirds, and now the Kraken aren't desperate to move him come the offseason. He's way cheaper now to acquire, right?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely cheaper to acquire now. You're just taking on that extra risk that, maybe you can wait, and it's probably worth the extra, maybe one round of draft pick, to know that the guy can play. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see. Like I
was going to say, I know, last thing, but like if he comes back and he doesn't look good because of the injury and everything, then you have all off season to waive him or bury him or whatever, right? Like there isn't a ton of risk if you're an opposing team and you're talking about like a 5th round pick, 4th round pick.
Well, I mean, we've seen the value of like, give or take like $3.5 million in cap space of basically just kind of dead money cap space. That's not an insignificant amount as far as, we've seen assets go for that are pretty high. So I think there is that risk there of having that dead money, especially if you're Ottawa. You need to pay a DeBrincat. You need to, pay certain guys. You probably should be up against the cap next year. I think it is something you do have to worry about potentially. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think one of us will be proven right or wrong, value wise, pretty within a month.
Yeah,
from now.
we'll know in the next month. We'll know. Yeah,
so but, we'll see who's right.
I understand the whole like moving him to LA. LA is the only team that would be desperate for it this year. I don't know though that they would do it. I certainly don't think we could be lucky enough and get a Matt Roy back. That's probably not happening.
No, they value him quite a bit. It's just the problem is they have too many defensemen on that side. But yeah. I think if someone who covers the Kings was saying the other day, if Matt Roy gets traded, it's just for an opposite-handed Matt Roy.
Yeah, basically. All right, so let's head over to Four Horsemen and hear this next trade call.
Hello, Rob Wilson, also known as Four Horsemen calling. When you look around the league, you find teams in the middle of the pack up against the salary cap when all their players are healthy. So, where are they headed? Maybe they want to free up some money long term. I think there's an obvious move here. The Seattle Kraken trade Bowie and future considerations to the Colorado Avalanche for Cale Makar. Really makes sense for both teams. Opens up a lot of flexibility for the Avalanche. Gives us the defensive piece to go along with Wright and Beniers for years to come. I think it's a win-win, and you get them at the right time. Have a good one.
There you have it, RJ. Going to bring Cale Makar to Seattle. It's what we all wanted. This is why it was significant to talk about Bowie's accomplishments out there at the All-Star game, proving his value,
Yeah, I mean, and what a rapid rise in his value that maybe now he's in these conversations here. Though, I think it might be an unpopular trade with the fans. Honestly, I think you might not be able to do it for that reason. I think Bowie has grown on everyone that much.
No.
No.
Let us know in the comment sections. Feel free to tweet at me, come at me on Discord, whatever. But I think majority of fans would rather have Cale Makar than Bowie for the foreseeable future. Just I'm willing to go out on that limb.
Okay, maybe you do it like, the trade Susie, bring in a replacement. You trade Bowie. Hey, you always got Seagull waiting in the wings.
Exactly.
My mascot idea.
You've got other mascot ideas waiting there. And yes, I know the kids would be upset you don't have the lovable mascot anymore. But as I've been saying for years about Cale Makar, he looks like he's straight out of the movie Frozen. Just make him the mascot. Dress him up like Hans or whatever. It would work. There's your mascot. You're fine. Kids would be happy. All right.
My last argument, though, only because I'm after the Strieger thing, feeling argumentative here.
Uh-huh.
You don't think Bowie would curse the Kraken franchise on his way out if they traded him away?
He could, but do you think his curses, like we just don't know enough about Bowie? Like, are his curses real? I don't know. Are they legitimate? Are they? Or should I be scared of them?
Risk reward, just like Drieger. All right.
Exactly. You got to weigh the risk of
Let us know in the
curse
comments. Do you think
McCarr.
Bui's curses are powerful enough?
Yep. All right, let's go to DJ for the next one.
Hey guys, this is DJ calling from snowy Salt Lake City, Utah. In regards to the trade deadline, I would say don't really do anything. I don't know why we're trying to mess with a good thing. We're already in a good playoff spot. Guys are playing well. I don't know why you'd want to try and mess up that chemistry. And also, I don't really want to mortgage the future when the Kraken are 2 years old, and I don't really want to give up assets that we don't really know a whole lot about. We've got good draft picks. So I'd say just kind of stand pat, and I'm just kind of happy to make the playoffs. I'm not really trying to make a playoff push to go deep into the playoffs. I'm just happy to make it as a Kraken fan. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Love the show and what you guys do for the Kraken community, and can't wait to watch. Thank you. Bye.
All right, feeling the love from Salt Lake City. I think this is probably the most popular opinion, realistically, out there, RJ. The don't mess with anything, don't mortgage the future, just let it ride. And as I was saying earlier, I'm kind of coming around to that myself.
Yeah, certainly after the Megna trade, I'm already pretty much there. I did think it was really necessary just to bring in one more defenseman, one more body, just to have somebody around. But I don't think that's entirely against the spirit of what DJ is saying here. You know, you're not mortgaging the future by sending out a 4th round pick. You're going to be all right. And I think that is ultimately the way to go with it. We had the Bo Horvat debate, you know, in a previous episode of the deep dive. And, you know, that's kind of what I was getting at, is you don't want to rock the boat here. You don't want to mortgage the future. And certainly there's no one really left on the market that I would feel comfortable doing that for. At least anyone that someone's talking about. You know, if there's some mystery player that's under contract longer, then, you know, you make whatever deal works for you. But I just don't think you need to do that right now.
Exactly. I have an interesting question to ask you, RJ, because this is something I've thought about for a while. I'd love to get your opinion on it. Given how low the odds are of anybody picked in rounds, I mean, really the 3rd round and later, but I'm going to say rounds 4 through 7. I would make the argument that every year you should be trying to trade all of your picks from round 4 through 7 for somebody who can even be a borderline NHL player, because your odds of even finding that with those draft picks are slim to none.
Oh man, you got breaking out the expected value, you know, draft pick charts. Be like, all right, well, here's how many of those picks you'd trade away for someone. But yeah, I certainly, you know, don't lose any sleep over, you know, a 4th to 7th round pick going for somebody who can be useful for you right now. And especially when you talk about the timeline of it too, you know, you want to keep some of those late picks just to have those dart throws, especially with the Kraken scouting staff. But certainly if you're a team that you feel like, you know, maybe you don't draft all that well, maybe that is something you should be doing every year.
It's one of those things that's always like surprising to me, is like the Jaycob Megna trade, where it's like the Kraken could here get a defenseman who over the next 2 seasons could end up playing like 100 NHL games for them, and they give up the chance to maybe find a guy who might end up with like 100 NHL games in their career. Like it's a pretty it's good value.
And I think in a way, draft picks are also just used as currency. I mean, I know the Sharks are probably going to want to be drafting a lot of players, but I think Mike Greer might think, okay, well, with this 4th round pick, I could use it, or I could trade it for someone else who could be a serviceable bottom of the lineup player, someone who who fits a little better for what we're going for.
Yep. All right, so let's move on to the next call here. Another mystery caller. Let's go.
Please trade Carson Soucy for Erik Karlsson. That'll do 2 things. It'll make our defense better, and my boss's last name is Soucy, so I can watch the games without thinking about work.
All right, RJ, we got Jaycob Megna. Let's complete the pairing. Bring in Erik Karlsson. What do you say? Soucy for Karlsson.
It's been a successful pairing this season. That'd be the ultimate, like, you know, like foreshock type of trade. Just like no one sees the second part of this coming.
Yes.
I mean, I think I've made my thoughts on the idea of acquiring Erik Karlsson clear. You know, to anybody who will listen, no, that contract is one of the league's worst. Still, even with him playing at this all-world level, there's a reason that he hasn't been moved yet. That contract is so bad. But I mean, you make a compelling argument as for why you should do it, and maybe why you should trade away Carson Soucy.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, somebody's gonna have to go out to make room for him. I think the Susie thing. We've talked about Susie already. He kind of feels like the most maybe expendable. I don't want to like say that word lightly, but that's kind of where most people are at with him. The contract. I mean, maybe if you could somehow swing a 3-team trade, RJ, so that the contract, the Sharks retain half, then somebody else retains half of that. All of a sudden, Carlson's not too bad. Maybe.
If you can do it cheaply, but good luck with that.
I was gonna say I still don't even know if that's worth like a first round pick going out with Susie to get him to get the salary retained twice or something. It would be a lot to bring in. That it's the years left that scares me more than the money, RJ, on that body. Yep. That's not a body that hasn't seen things. You know what I mean? And Erik Karlsson.
Exactly. And some of those bad years right in what should be the Kraken's real competitive window.
Yeah. All right. To the final call from another mystery caller here. Let's listen to this one.
Yes. My trade proposal or acquisition is I would like to go after Jonathan Toews. I see if Chicago would be willing to give him up for maybe a second-round draft pick. I think, one, he leads the NHL in face-off percentage, which I think is something that the Kraken is severely lacking at the moment. And plus, he's a leader. I know that people say that we got leaders on this team, but he's a leader that actually led his team to win the cup 3 times. And I think that's something that's invaluable for a young team. And I think it's worth taking a shot. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. So kind of some of the same arguments made about Bo Horvat, but talking about Jonathan Toews. Now, somebody that, unlike Bo Horvat, you wouldn't be trading away with kind of the expectation of then extending and keeping around for a long period of time. It would just be for this year. This would very much be one of those, like, if you do think the Kraken have a legit shot this year, this is a trade you would look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of, rental forward that, look, we've talked about how they don't need anything more as far as depth scoring. They're fine at forward, but this trade of Jonathan Toews, you could make an argument that he has something that, maybe the Kraken could use more of. And that's just the intangible things, the experience, the leadership. And I know you've got a couple, 2 cup winners in Yanni Gourde and Andre Burakovsky. But, there's kind of, the cliche, and it's cliche for a reason. You can never have too many cups in the room. You can never have too much experience there, and leadership. I think that's, a word that was used in the voicemail there. I think we're happy with the Kraken's leadership situation, but how can you put a value on what Jonathan Toews has seen and been through and led his teams to? Ultimately, I'm going to go with a no on this one, just because I think the Kraken are still okay at forward. I'm okay with their leadership situation. I think it's fine. And also, I think bringing in Toews, unfortunately, kind of puts this weird spotlight on it where you've got this.
You're not flying under the radar. That's for
exactly.
sure.
That's what I was getting at. You're not flying under the radar anymore. And I think the Kraken probably do better when they are flying under the radar.
Yeah, even with with Chicago retaining half, you'd be then looking at Susie going out probably to make up the space that the Kraken would need to clear to bring in a Jonathan Toews. And in that sense, you could probably move Susie for whatever pick you would need to acquire Toews. So like that in some ways you could look at it like Susie for Toews 1-for-1. Obviously, the face-off stuff is good. He would be like a really good defensive asset down the middle. He could provide some more depth scoring. I get the whole he's been there and done that thing, but like the last year and a half have kind of called into question maybe his leadership on certain issues, and whether or not I don't know that the fan base would exactly welcome him with open arms because of some of those questions involving the off ice aspects of his leadership. So I don't know. I understand it. Like, again, it's very much the arguments that I was kind of making for Bo Horvat, but I like the idea of a Bo Horvat or someone younger that was going to be around for a longer term and then could kind of grow with this team and with this group. I still don't know that this is the time to, even if it's as simple as just moving out Susie to bring in a Jonathan Taves. I don't know. It's just such an upsetting of the apple cart. Because what do you then do down the middle? You've got kind of Matty. You're going to keep him where he's comfortable. You bump Wenberg, I guess, down the lineup, but then you start looking at, well, is Geeky not going to be in the lineup? Is Sprong not going to be in the lineup? Is Donato not going to be in the lineup? Like, who at forward is out consistently to make room for Jonathan Taves, and does that disrupt kind of what the Kraken have going with this whole Hackstall just running whatever line is feeling it that night? You know what I mean?
Yeah, whoever would be out would be somebody who has definitely earned a spot in the lineup and deserves to stay in. So yeah, I think it might upset things. And Ron Francis has talked about not wanting to upset the chemistry in the room. That's something he's definitely wary of. And I think this deal might run some of the biggest risk of doing that.
Right. Otherwise, I like that direction. I think that that's more of like something that we would see from them maybe next year or the year after that, where it's like,
Yep.
you know, maybe you've got Shane Wright and you're kind of built around the idea of having Shane Wright as one of your top centers, but maybe next year he's not quite ready. So you bring in, you know, for a playoff run. So you bring in somebody, you know, like that on a 1-year deal. I could very much see that. You talk about intangibles though, RJ. Jonathan Taves, now as we transition over to the players you and I would look at. And again, big caveats here because the Megna trade kind of fixed what I think we were both looking at. I think you and I were both kind of on the same page of, I didn't even look at forwards. I was just like, this forward group is fine. We've already got too many of them. I don't want anyone to be taken out of the lineup. I'm not even looking at forwards. I only looked at defensemen. And I did in a little bit only focus on left-handed defensemen. I was kind of thinking about. I think we
might be going after the same player here.
Did we go after the same player here? Does your player happen to play for the Detroit Red Wings right now?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right. Cool. All right. This will make the rest of the episode a lot better.
We got different players then. All right. So as we talk about it, you just talked about intangibles, the idea of somebody having been there, done that. Worked on a team. I'm looking at somebody with multiple Stanley Cup rings, RJ, on the Detroit Red Wings on an expiring deal, only 28 years old. Olli Maatta, come on down, join the Seattle Kraken. He would be a fan favorite. Let's get another Finn in this lineup. He's a fantastic man. I think he would be perfect for their third pairing. He's a guy that you can trust in that third pairing. He can contribute on the PK. He'll move the puck, enough for you. But the bottom line is you're getting that playoff experience that he has from Pittsburgh, Chicago, Los Angeles. I mean, every stop along the way in his career, he's been this kind of guy where he can come in, plug that hole for you, and give you the chance to make a run for a Stanley Cup.
I should have known you were going to go with a former Penguin there, someone that you knew. And you know what? It's tough because with the with the Megna trade, it makes it a little bit less palatable.
I know.
And there were so many guys kind of in that range. I think the Kraken could have gone for it, Megna being one of them. I would have to think Maatta would have been a little bit more expensive than that. And maybe the price kind of was a factor there, but I think he plugs that hole quite well. I do like your pick there as far as your flag plant guy. I don't know that he makes sense now.
I know.
Unfortunately,
I know.
Post Megna trade, but A for effort here, and I think you kind of hit on it as far as a fit.
Yeah, I just think he does everything they need. You're talking about a guy who's never had more than 28 penalty minutes. Like, dude does not take penalties. He just goes out there and plays 18 to 20 minutes, regardless of what team he's on. Really solid. And like I said, he's a fantastic guy. I know Kraken fans would fall in love with him. He's just a lovable guy. You go listen to any of his interviews. He did a fantastic interview when he first got to Detroit on like kind of their show. It's out there on YouTube. And you just go like, this guy is so much fun. And hey, Kraken have had good luck so far, especially here, the recent luck with Finns. Bring in another one.
I will never ever be opposed to bringing in more Finns. I'm fully on board with that. You got to have more Finns in the room.
Absolutely. And, expiring deal, maybe if he likes Seattle, he likes being in that room, you can work out something more long-term for him, and it wouldn't be that costly, I don't think. So Those were all the reasons why, yes, again, the Megna thing, like, we almost have to act like that didn't happen for some of these because we were preparing for that not to have happened. But yeah, Oli Mata's my guy. Who did you have? And then we can kind of talk about some other options as well.
Okay, so the guy I zeroed in on, and we talked about this a little bit before. You asked me the question before we recorded, just so we were kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
What do you look for in a defenseman when you're targeting someone in a trade for a fit here? Mm-hmm. And I think we both agreed there's no one number you can really look at that makes sense. You have to look at the big picture. We talked about it in terms of Megna, where you look at all his numbers and they look great, but he's attached to Erik Karlsson. You have to kind of try and learn the whole story. And ultimately, you know, when you pick a guy, when you plant a flag on a guy, kind of vibes have to play a little bit of a role in it, where you just feel like, yeah, this just feels like a good fit. And I think there's an element of that in Mata. I mean, I see exactly what you're going for there.
Yep.
And you know, my guy is kind of all vibes here. That's a lot of what I'm going for. And he would be more expensive. This is more of a, you're going for it this year.
All right.
It's a puck mover.
All right.
Shane Gostisbehere.
Okay. Ghosty Bear. I like it.
Yep. So he's a pending UFA with the Coyotes. If you remember, he's someone that we were potentially looking at around expansion draft time, as, you know, if you could get an asset to bring him on and just take on that contract for a couple of years. But he's had a pretty good resurgence in Arizona. He's played well this season. I mean, he's you know, almost to the 30-point mark in 48 games on that Arizona team, which is pretty good. He's played pretty much all his ice time with Jacob Chikrin, so you could argue that's a good reason why. But the big connection that I want to go for is Gostisbehere and Dave Haxtell.
Yep.
Because he had his best years in Philadelphia when Dave Haxtell was the head coach. He's someone that thrives in Dave Haxtell's system, where we've seen how active the defenseman can be, you know, the kind of free reign they have to jump into the offensive zone. We've seen that with everybody, even down to the Jamie Alexiaks and Carson Soucy's that have been able to thrive in that system. We know Gostisbehere can do it. And if you're looking for more of an offensive type defenseman, someone you can move around the lineup, and he will be a little bit more costly, but I think you could have that Gostisbehere Haxtell synergy coming back, and that could help you a lot during a playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. If the magic's going to be there again between those two, then, you know, you got to go for it. Would certainly maybe help out the power play, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like it's one of those, like, I don't know if it would. You'd obviously make the trade hoping that he would. Probably not going to help you out on the PK at all. Although the PK's
it's not for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm a big fan of Shane Gostisbehere. I like what he can do. I remember him back in his prime during those Dave Haxtell years, and he was a really frustrating player to play against. He really, really was. I just wonder how much of that is still there, and how much of that, you know, kind of has left him. And then I also, you know, just money wise, what is Arizona looking at as far as a return? Could you get any retained, because you might need to if you're the Kraken? So is that going to happen? I guess it would also, again, be predicated on, are you moving out of Carson Soucy, in which case you don't have to worry about it.
And that's where I could see where you move out of Soucy, get an asset back, flip it for a Gostisbehere, and as almost a 1-for-1 type of thing. I think Gostisbehere just might be a better fit for this blue line this year than a Carson Soucy. You basically swapped rentals.
Yeah. My only concern with Shane Gostisbehere is the playoffs. Because the one thing with him is he would disappear come playoff time. His game with the Flyers never seemed suited for the playoffs. I look, you know, his best regular season when he had 65 points in 78 games in the regular season.
Yeah.
He then had 1 point in 6 playoff games and was a -8. So that's the thing that worries me with him, is that, you know, if you're doing any sort of deal like this, it's made with the playoffs in mind. And I don't know that Ghosty Bear is your guy for that.
Yeah, you would need other guys to kind of, you know, step up and provide in certain areas. You know, he'd be a little bit more of a gadget usage type of player. But you've got a lot of big bruising defensive defensemen. And maybe this is a little bit more of what you need. Certainly, if anything, my main concern too is if anything were to happen to Justin Schultz,
right,
where all of a sudden you're really missing, you know, that offensive defenseman side. he's better insurance than I guess Susie is for the other guys.
Adam Larson is right there wanting to shoot the puck.
You know they'll never give him those chances though, Dylan. Come on.
I know. Some other names that I thought of. The other one that I kind of thought of that stuck out to me. Just to say it was gosh, where's Ottawa here? Here we go. It was Travis Hamonic.
Oh, okay.
I just think again, it's yeah, he's a right shot kind of guy, but that's somebody with experience you could kind of plug in if you need to. I could see Ottawa, being willing to shop him on the expiring deal, all that kind of stuff. It just felt like a good veteran. Again, you did the Megna trade, so maybe it's irrelevant now, but that was the other name that I had kind of looked at as far as guys out there.
Yeah, no, I think that could be a fine fit. I mean, I don't remember if he still has, for family reasons, needs to stay in any particular locale. I remember that was a thing at one point.
Yeah, but that was Western Canada, and then he okayed the trade out to Ottawa, so I'm assuming it's
oh, okay, yeah, right. No, that makes
Seattle
sense.
would work, yeah. So I thought Travis Hamonic. Like I said, I looked at Ghosty Bear, I looked at kind of the other names, the Columbus guy, I'm spacing on his name. Basically all the guys that have been talked about here at the deadline. I just think the Kraken might have outdid it all and made their best move and made their only move already with Jaycob Megna.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. So Dylan, like if you are Ron Francis,
yeah,
what's your what's your mindset here going forward? I mean, do you want to try and make a deal for another defenseman? What, do you want? You probably don't want some like depth forward with edge here. We talked about it, but like, what are you thinking here? Because I definitely have a kind of a mindset that I would like him to go with.
I'm staying away from disrupting anything forward wise. I'm letting Hackstall just handle that as far as who's playing, who's in the lineup, what's going on. It's been working, like I said, basically outside of like a 2-week stretch in December, it's worked the rest of the year. No reason to rock that boat. I'm worried about things like special teams and face-offs come playoff time, but I don't see an easy like one trade fix to that. I think that's something you're just gonna have to live and die by come playoff time this year, knowing that your window is really in the future. If I'm him, like, I make calls on some of these other defensemen and I take calls on a Carson Soucy, and if things line up where, hey, I can get an Oli Mata for a third, but someone's offering me a second for a Soucy, then I like make a deal like that. But otherwise, I don't think I do anything. I focus on figuring out what my goaltending situation is. Do I need to be moving a Chris Drieger? What are my options there? And then after that, I just work on scheduling maybe some sort of cool post-trade deadline interview with a really awesome media outlet. Probably that's then what I would do.
Yep, definitely. Seattle Times, it's got to be.
Yes.
That's where it's going.
Oh man.
But,
yep.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with you largely on that. You want to be opportunistic. That's kind of the word that I'm thinking about for Ron Francis. You've made the deal that you need to make in Jaycob Megna. Now you can just look around and see what's out there. Yep. If you see a good Carson Soucy flip that really makes sense, you can do it, but no need to force your hand. Only do it if you get great value. You hold all the cards now, which is great.
Yeah.
And as far as bringing in more players, go bargain shopping. If there's a player that you feel is undervalued or that isn't getting a lot of interest that would help you, yeah, go ahead and do that, and maybe for a smaller asset, bring someone in. A name that I did think about is like a Gustav Nyquist, and I don't really like the player too much. He was a trade deadline acquisition for the Sharks. I don't think it went all that well. So that's kind of what I'm remembering there. But he's injured for pretty much most of the regular season, maybe all the remainder of the regular season. Someone like that who wouldn't upset the balance of forwards because he's not playing for you right away. And then who knows what injuries you're dealing with come playoff time. Maybe he's someone that can slot in for you, or maybe he's someone that can just, sit there as a scratch until you need him. An acquisition like that might make a whole lot of sense. I don't know what he would cost, but I imagine it's certainly less than it would have otherwise been. Mm-hmm. So a player like that, I think, could make sense. But really, just find the opportunities where they are. If nothing shows up, then don't worry about it. You've made the deal you need to make.
Yeah, and like I said, feel free to go shopping with rounds 4 through 7.
Yep.
Just like that's in my mind what I would have available to me. If I can't get somebody like that where I think, hey, come playoff time, this player could make a difference for us without disrupting what we've got going. If I can't get them for something around 4 or later pick, then I'm not looking at it, kind of thing. Unless it's somebody just wowed me, like somebody wants to give me a first round pick for Carson Soucy, I'm taking that, and then I'm going out and I'm seeing who I can get with one of my 3 seconds to replace him, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I don't know that that's on the table. And then,
well, balls in your court, Oilers.
Yeah, and then I start doing this is where I start playing 4D chess, because what I do is I go and I find any other players represented by Sebastian Aho's agent, and I start making a relationship there with those other players for longer term things, which we'll get into, I'm sure, in a future podcast. My whole Sebastian Aho needs to be a Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about this, the more it really makes sense to me. Actually, I'm quite excited at this prospect. His agent is Mika Rautakalio. So I believe he's probably Finnish.
Olli Mata. Let's see. Does this match up?
No Olli Mata. Sorry.
No.
I think he only has just Finnish clients. Aho, Arturi Lehkonen, Joel Armia, Anton Forsberg, a Swede, Jani Hakanpää, Joel Kiviranta, and Henry Nikkanen.
See, Chris Drieger, send him off to Ottawa for Anton Forsberg. Just for that. No,
just to talk to
doesn't
the
make
agent.
a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. It's because Olli Mata came and played in London. He went North American at such a young age, at 16. But I just love him so much. He's fantastic. Go listen to Olli Mata talk, everybody. He's awesome. All right, that's gonna do it for our kind of trade deadline. It's not like is it a special? I guess it's a special. We had callers and everything. That was a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody who participated in that. Thank you so much. I always appreciate hearing from you, all of your fun ideas, even trading Bowie for Cale Makar. I love stuff like that. So thank you all for participating. Thanks for joining us. Thanks one more time to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring this podcast. And we will see you all next time, which will be like during a post-game live, because Kraken hockey's back. Yay!
Yes!
So
Kraken
excited.
hockey is back. We're getting games this week. Enjoy, everyone.
Yep. All right. We'll see y'all. Hey, everyone. Before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons: Absurdly Sane, Alex, Andrew, Austin H, Austin W, Beef, Burnt Creme, Chris, Coop, Daryl, DJ Singletone, Duthan, Eli, Emmy Chan, Gaby, Gary, Harry Legionary, Jay, Joni, Joshua, Kepler,
Kitty B. Kraken, Kyle, Leanne, Maya, Michelle, Nunya, Paige, Paul, Rebecca, Sarah, Scott, Sean, Shoeshine, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Team YMIAT, Tank Commander Ty, Tyler, and Wendy. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.